Did medieval people eat blueberry pie and have cranberries for Thanksgiving? Did they eat lingonberry pancakes in medieval Sweden? Did they have cantaloupe and melons for summertime? These and other questions will be answered right after this. I'm Professor Jerome Arkenberg and your host for this episode of History Waits for No One. I've been teaching a wide variety of history courses at colleges across this country for the past 30 years, and in today's episode you'll hear about the kinds of fruit available in medieval Europe, how medieval fruit was classified according to medieval humoral theory, according to medieval physicians, the medicinal benefits and dangers of eating medieval fruit, and according to medieval nutritionists, how and when fruit should be eaten and why. But first, make sure to click like, share, subscribe, and that little bell thingy so I can continue to bring you more great videos just like this one. Apples. Apples were a staple food in medieval Europe, even though medieval varieties were smaller and not as perfectly shaped as today's. And if not eaten fresh or cooked right away, apples were stored in a cool, dry place for the winter, or peeled, cored, and dried whole or sliced. They were classed as cold and dried by medieval physicians who said all varieties, sweet and sour, were good for the heart, but bad for the nerves, but okay if they had been cooked first. Apples were often cored and dried, as I said, and then sliced or mashed, and cooked, as physicians considered raw apples bad for the body. So in the Middle Ages, you should never, ever pluck an apple off the tree and eat it raw. Yes. Apples were used in a number of meat dishes, a variety of fillings, and in pies, fritters, rissoles, sauces, and Lenten dishes. In England and Normandy, they were also turned into apple cider, which may or may not be fermented, or added to verjuice. Apricots. Native to Armenia, apricots were widespread throughout medieval Europe and were used in a variety of sauces, especially pies and pastries. Considered cold and dry, they were thought nothing more than a laxative by medieval physicians. Berries. In medieval Europe, blackberries, raspberries, and strawberries were eaten despite their small size. They were much smaller than modern varieties. They were classed by medieval physicians as mildly cooling, cold, and moist. However, other types of berries, such as blueberries and cranberries, were native to North America and not known until the settlement of the Pilgrims in the early 17th century. Other berries, such as loganberries and lingonberries, were developed in modern times. Cherries. Cherries were indigenous to Europe and grown both privately and commercially, often appearing in fruit mousses and preserves, tarts, and in Germany as Kirschwasser, a fermented cherry drink reserved for the nobility and other upper classes. Because of their cold and moist nature, medieval physicians said cherries were bad for the stomach if eaten raw. But Cooking them and adding wine to them were two ways to reduce their harmful effects, and better yet, cook them and add wine to the mix while they're cooking. Oh, it's even so much better. Citron. The citron is native to Southeast Asia, as are most other citrus fruits. The citron reached Europe by the time of the Romans. In medieval times, only the rind was used, candied in sugar, as physicians said the fruit itself upset the stomach. It was, however, despite this, considered by these physicians and medieval nutritionists as a good remedy for seasickness, pulmonary disorder, intestinal ailments, scurvy, yes, it is a citrus, scurvy, and other disorders. Damsons. Damsons are a plum variety, smaller and higher in sugar, but more sour. Native to Great Britain, but were rarely used in medieval cooking. The damson was classified as cold and moist, and was said to hinder digestion while also being useful as a laxative, and I guess in that case, for plums, some things never change. Figs. Native to the tropics, figs in medieval Europe were an expensive import, and thus only for the upper or wealthy classes, though they were popularly used during Lent as a meat substitute. Go figure. Classed by medieval physicians as warm and moist, dried figs were thought to cleanse the stomach and give strength to the body. But fresh figs were thought less nutritious and to create gas, flatulence, and bad humors. Dates. Dates were native to Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, and were common in Arab cookery, though, like figs, expensive in medieval Europe. And in medieval Europe, they would be used as a sweetener or, again, another special treat during Lent. Medieval physicians classified them as cold and dry, warm and dry, or warm and moist, depending on the kind of date. Some were believed to harm the intestines, others would harm the teeth and mouth, and yet others would harm your voice. Perhaps that's why you can hear my voice going a bit now. Clearly, I must have had a bad date. Grapes. In the Middle Ages, grapes were eaten fresh, added to dishes dried as raisins, or drunk as unfermented grape juice, or used as verjuice, or vinegar, or made into wine. And of course, wine being the drink of choice for anybody who could afford it. With great quantities of wine produced, traded, and consumed all across medieval Europe, because remember, besides wanting to drink it, it was also required for use in every mass performed by a priest. Remember, every priest is required to say at least one mass a day. Physicians describe grapes as moderately warm and moist, with mature white grapes with a thin skin preferred, and in general were said to be good for the stomach, lungs, chest, liver, and spleen. Sweet grapes were thought to cleanse the belly, nourish the body, and cause both gas and, get this, penile erection. Yes, sweet grapes were the medieval Viagra. Sour grapes, on the other hand, did not have that effect and were said to have a cooling effect on the body. Please, no sour grapes now. I've got my medieval Viagra going. Vinegar, used for thousands of years for medicinal purposes and to flavor and preserve food through pickling, comes from soured wine or occasionally soured beer, soured wine being far more common. It was a universal seasoning for anyone who's using wine in a great quantity, of course, that was cheap and widely available for sauces, stuffing, and fish dishes. Classified by medieval physicians as cool and dry, it was held good for fighting toothache, cooling the body, quenching thirst. Yes, you can drink it. In fact, the sort of vinegar was the drink of choice given to Roman soldiers. So good for quenching thirst, stopping the flow of blood, treating burns and infected wounds, treating the bites of rabid dogs, and stimulating the appetite. However, they said, consumed in excess, it emaciated the body, led to weakened eyesight, and harmed the nerves. So keep that in mind when drinking vinegar. Lemons, like quinces, originated in Southeast Asia, and though an integral part of Arab cookery, were an expensive import for medieval Europeans and thus were rarely used. So in the Middle Ages, there's no little kid outside his house selling lemonade for half a farthing. Lemons were classed as cold and dry by medieval physicians, but the rinds were useful as a digestive and an antidote to melancholy, especially melancholy babies. Lemon juice, boiled down to a syrup, was useful, they said, as a remedy against choleric humors, and the seeds were very good as an antidote against virtually every poison, they said. So in the Middle Ages, if you're given lemons, what do? Well, you don't make lemonade. It's so expensive, you might just sell it and make a great profit. Limes, like lemons and citron, also originated in Southeast Asia, and were also another expensive import for medieval Europeans. Again, there's also no limeade, no kids making that. Once again, however, they were extensively used in Arab cooking, in part because it was easier to grow lemons and limes and citrons and the rest, other citrus fruits, in North Africa and around the Mediterranean. Medieval physicians classed limes as cold and dry. Again, the rinds, like lemon rinds, also useful as a digestive and an antidote to melancholy. The juice, boiled down to syrup, useful as a remedy against choleric humors, and the seeds as a great antidote against poison. Melons. Native to Africa and the Middle East, melons first appeared in Italy in the 5th century AD, then spread to the rest of Europe by the 10th century. They were classed by medieval physicians as cold and moist, which makes sense, and thought by these physicians to be suitable for the medieval diet, but only if eaten with cheese or meat, and at the end of the meal as a digestive. Medieval oranges, again, all the citrus fruits, including oranges, seem to have come out of Southeast Asia. Now, in the Middle Ages, oranges were uniformly bitter oranges, as the modern sweet variety does not appear until the 17th century. In other words, more of a juice orange than an eating orange. These bitter oranges first appear in Sicily in the 11th century, and then Spain the following century, the 12th. But of course, like other citrus fruits, could not be grown, at least outside, in Northern Europe. Oranges were eaten as an aperitif to stimulate digestion, as recommended by medieval physicians. The juice sometimes added to dishes, and candied orange peel a favorite treat at the end of a banquet. Classed as cold and wet, these selfsame medieval physicians said oranges could counteract an overheated stomach, the heat of youth, in other words, desire and energy, I would say, and the heat of summer. Ooh. Note that other common citrus fruits, I said, like the grapefruit, and the tangerine did not exist in the Middle Ages. Peaches. Peaches were native to northwest China and brought to Europe after Alexander the Great's conquest of Persia. Peaches were occasionally used in pies and fritters, but were thought best used by medieval physicians as an aperitif to stimulate the appetite, and these self-same physicians, however, did take a dim view of peaches, which they said caused putrid humors in the body, corrupted other consumed food, and acted as a laxative. Essentially, prunes and peaches, great laxatives. Pears. Pears were cultivated in most of medieval Europe, but were especially popular in Italy and France. Often halved and dried to preserve them, like apples, they were used for stuffing, sauces, meat dishes, and for making perry, both fermented and unfermented. Classed as cold and moist, medieval physicians said they fortified the stomach and were best eaten, however, cooked at the end of a meal as a digestive rather than at the beginning as an aperitif. So a great dessert, but a terrible appetizer. Plums. Plums and their dried version, prunes, were in frequent use, mostly in puddings, not just in England, but elsewhere. Plums and prunes were classified by medieval physicians as cold and moist, and both were said to hinder digestion, while also being useful as a laxative. Yes, some things never change. Pomegranates. The pomegranate, native to Persia, was common in Arab cuisine, and perhaps a bit in England, where seeds were used as a garnish and the juice added to some dishes. Classified as warm and moist in nature by medieval physicians, sweet pomegranates, as opposed to bitter ones, sweet pomegranates were prescribed for coughs and stimulating the appetite if eaten before a meal. So, a great appetizer. Quinces. Quinces were the golden apples of Greco-Roman mythology. Like apples and pears, they were used for stuffing, sauces, and in a sweetmeat known as cotonac. Classified as cold and dry, they were praised by medieval physicians for stimulating the appetite, aiding digestion, and being a cure for heartache. Oh, I'm so upset. My girlfriend has left me. Quick, give me a quince. Verjuice, not exactly a fruit, but an offshoot of it. But it's not something that we drink. Verjuice is the tart juice of crab apples, unripe grapes, or other unripe fruit that was frequently added to medieval dishes. So you don't drink it, you just add it to a dish. Classified by medieval physicians as extremely cold and moderately dry, verjuice was used similarly to vinegar, especially in cooling sauces designed to counteract the heat of roasted meat. Watermelons. Yes, watermelons. Native to Africa, the watermelon seems to have been brought back to Europe by the Crusaders, and by the 14th century was in common use as a dessert. Medieval physicians classified them as cold and humid in the second degree, and said they were useful for cooling a fever and purifying the urine, but could cause pain in the loins and the stomach, which could, however, be neutralized if they were served with honey and olive oil. And I can maybe see the honey in the watermelon. Olive oil, interesting. Let me know what you liked about this video and what other historical topics or subjects you'd like to see in future videos. Be sure to click like, share, and especially subscribe, as it will help me bring you more great videos. And don't forget to click on that little bell thingy so you'll know when the next History Waits for No One video is posted. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the past.